Hi, I'm Nick Briscoe. Welcome to The Flip Side, my infotainment channel where I post commentary and interviews about anything and everything that I find interesting. This is my first video interview. It's with my good friend Jasper Østergaard Larsen. He's one of my favourite people. Very talented, interesting, inspiring. This interview is a recording of perhaps one of hundreds of conversations that Jasper and I have had that just free flow from topic to topic. The main thing that I was interested to hear Jasper talk about here was food, and in particular his take on veganism. I'm so grateful to Jasper for letting me experiment on him. Experiment in two ways. Firstly, I've been planning to and wanting to do these interviews for at least 3 years. And it's only now that the conditions have come together for me to make this reality. I've been so inspired by certain podcasters in North America, and their infotainment is so interesting. The main ingredient that hooks me every time is an unedited, unscripted, long-form conversation. And this is what I've attempted to do here with Jasper. Jasper and I just talk. Secondly, Jasper let me experiment with how to actually technically do this interview. You'll see it's all very Heath Robinson, everything held together with gaffer and velcro. I used really old iPhones and an ancient GoPro as cameras, and I experimented with OBS gaming software to record the live video feeds. In the end, it's become crystal clear to me that unfortunately, it's not possible for me to do professional quality videos with only the equipment that I currently have. I have to do a very expensive upgrade. I'm mentioning this to reach out for your support in order to be able to achieve this upgrade as soon as possible. With this in mind, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack channel. That's nickbriscoe.substack.com, Nick Briscoe, all one word. And or please consider contributing to my funding campaign, which you can find at donorbox.org/Nick-Briscoe. I've put more details about exactly what I need and why I need it in this podcast description and also on my Substack channel. Having done this one experimental interview with Jasper, I'm now hooked. I'll definitely be posting more interviews soon. I think that this conversation with Jasper is both interesting and challenging. I hope you'll take a look. I don't think you'll regret it. Thank you for all your support. Enjoy. Here we go. Jasper Larsen, this is your opportunity to introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. I'm Jasper Østergaard Larsen, and Danish is Eastern Farm. I'm 39. I was born in Næstved in Denmark, and at the age of 4, my mom moved to Liberia, Africa, where I grew up in civil war for 6 years. Returned to Denmark at the age of 10, and who am I? It's a good question. I've been studying a lot of information technology through my life as a programmer, designer, but most of my life has actually been about self-development. I come from a very troublesome past myself, and I've always been interested in the human's ability to change, breaking patterns, and how can I add more to my life to experience peace, self-love, and all these things. And for many years it was hard, and now I also studied NLP as a therapist. And what I'm working with now mostly is to create a method for people that are at rock bottom all over the world, so that they can get to a level where they can start to help themselves. Because we have a lot of people that can't go like you and me into Buddhism and meditate. We have a lot of people that are not ready to go to a therapy and seek help, as many others are. And how do we help them? So that is my goal. How do we help those that are most in need?
Okay,
and that's what I want to do.
I know from talking to you that you're developing that project now.
Yeah.
do you feel ready to say where people can find out about it? Is there anywhere they can find out about anything about that?
Yeah, they can read a little bit about it on my website. There's
Okay.
2 excerpts from it. There's like an introduction and a small range of methods on my website. It's called jaspersdialogue.com.
Okay. All one word, Jasper's Dialogue.
One word.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of blog posts, ancient ones, about different impulse and feelings. What's the difference? Why do we suppress impulses and stuff like this?
Okay, so just so people listening to this know, there's no pre-planning gone into this. I can hear my voice popping a bit, so I'm just trying to find a good place on this microphone because it's popping a bit. We've got a few things that we've been talking about just between us as friends, and that is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So there's no script to this. There's no real plan to it. So anytime you don't, if I touch on a subject you don't want to talk about, you decide I don't want to talk about anything. Okay. But you just said in your introduction that you had quite a troubled past.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that something that you would like to expand upon? Would you like to explain a bit about that?
Sure. Both my parents, from the moment I was born, a good example is they met in prison and got married in prison so they could be together.
Okay, I didn't know that. They met in prison.
Yeah. They knew each other before,
thickens.
but I was actually conceived. They made me in prison, and I was born a few months after they both got out.
That'd be a fantastic T-shirt, made in prison.
Yeah, that's... And the life, I think, until I was 18 years old, it was very troublesome. You know, both my parents kidnapped me from each other on numerous occasions. From I was 10 and we came back, my mom was a very strong heroin addict.
Yeah.
So I was very much left up to myself. I would go get drugs for her. She would sell my stuff, and I got into gangs and selling drugs when I was like 13, 14. And I was a very hard-ass dude. Mm-hmm. But I always had this like inner core of self-love, and I wanted something else than what my family showed me. So I think until I was like 18, where I was actually, what do you call it? We went to court, and they, what do you call it in English? Sorry.
Yeah, we should explain. Jasper's from Denmark, but his English is fantastic.
Thank you, mate. We went to court, and they didn't. I didn't get convicted, but they tried me with terrorism and national security something because.
So you were accused.
Yeah,
of that.
accused,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because we're counterfeiting money.
Yeah.
And I think that was when.
Who's we?
Me and my mom. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, you know, I've been tied to chairs. I've been shot at. I've shot at people. I've been in many fights, and this is not the same being you're seeing in front of you.
Yeah.
So from the age of 18, I went through all this self-development. I just knew I wanted something different from my life than that. Yeah. And I was in Narcotics Anonymous for 12 years, doing a lot of self-development. And while I was on welfare as a young student, I would pay for my own therapy because I wanted a better life for myself.
Yeah.
So I've always been very determined to go beyond what is known and how do I get there. And if no one wants to help me, I'll do it myself. You know, that's kind of my determination.
Okay. Right. So I don't really know exactly how to introduce what it is we've been talking about, because I don't want to I don't want there to be any bias in this conversation, but more or less for months and months and months, you know, on different occasions, you and I have been talking about food and what people eat and why they eat it and how they eat it. And more or less, we could, again, as I'm talking, I'm thinking that the next sentence I'm going to say, it starts to sound political, because I was going to say a plant-based diet, which is quite a politicized term now. But we've been talking about people who don't eat meat and people who do eat meat and vegetarians and vegans and I don't know what you call a person who only eats meat. But like that could let's say
Carnivarian, I don't know.
Carnivorous diet. So, do you want to just open this up and just explain, why this is such a hot topic and why it's been such an interesting topic for us to talk about?
Well, I think first of all, I've been a vegan for 2.5, 3 years now.
Yeah,
I've always been quite vegetarian and been reluctant with what I put in my body, and we've had many conversations because you do eat meat, and we both have a great interest in, I don't know if the right word is mindfulness, but it's like how do I improve life, and is what I'm doing right, and especially about agriculture. We've talked a lot about this as well, which I know we both find interesting, but you know a lot more about that, like topsoil and stuff like this. You know a lot more than I do about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if okay, let's say I've listened to podcasts about it. I've watched documentaries about it, so I'm by no means an expert, but I've found it very interesting. It's a topic that's been very interesting, and I think that I don't want to give the game away too much, because this isn't really so much about my opinion. I'm more interested in what you think about all of this, but. If I go right to the end of the debate, and kind of like give the whole game away, I think that the solution is soil. I think that the solution to a lot of problems in the world is how we manage that resource. In fact, I think that's the problem. We see it as a resource. And actually, it's not a resource. It's the thing that's keeping the planet alive, and we need to take care of it. That's the opinion that I have. But it's very much linked to food. It's very much linked to health. I think it's very much linked to spirituality. I think it's very much linked to not only physical health but mental health as well. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think a good word is regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
It's a word I've heard used a few times because there is a big issue like with pesticides. And how do we, especially not how we, but how does industry do this? So the industrial use of pesticides and the industrial way to market food, both plants and animals, is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Because not only materially are we destroying the planet, but spiritually we are consuming a lot of really bad karma, both from animals and plants. And that is a huge issue, which I think we'll touch upon in this podcast.
Okay, well, listen, you said, I heard you say it, you said it here.
Yeah.
You said that 3 years ago, more or less, you became a vegan. I mean, do you want to explain that? You want to explain the process or the path or the reason that you became vegan?
Yeah.
And also, what the hell is a vegan? Explain it to me.
Well,
explain that whole thing. Yeah?
Okay, like being a vegan is basically that you don't consume anything that also harms animals. Yeah. Basically. But I think
you don't consume anything that also harms animals.
No, you don't harm animals in any way, and you don't kill them. And for me, mostly when people ask me, I try to say like I'm also vegan, because actually I don't like the word veganism. I think it becomes very religious, in a way, in a negative way. I don't say all religion is negative, but the word religious in that way becomes very convinced, and it's like, these guys are wrong, I'm right. Yeah. And I don't like that. But to go back to why did I become a vegan? Yeah. Is because I was on sort of a spiritual journey quest. I was coming here to Spain like 3.5, 4 years ago from Denmark. And I met these people at a shaman retreat place that I found very inspiring. I was preparing myself to do ayahuasca. And I met a lot of people that wanted me to do ayahuasca. And I kept on saying no, because for me, And I guess on my Buddhist foundation, I'm very aware of energies and how does these things affect me. And if I have someone telling me, oh, you have to do this, then I'll ask the question, why? Why do you want to sell me this? And it took me at least a year meeting different shamans and people until I felt ready to do a conscious choice, like I'm going to do ayahuasca with these people, where I met some lovely people that also live here in Spain, and they also inspired me to be vegan. We had a lot of talks about especially pigs. I've never really been into pigs, and I stopped that a long time ago.
What, eating them, you mean?
Yeah, because I found out, like, through my studies, religiously, I've read a lot also about Christianity. Like, the demons asked Jesus, where can we then go? And he said, you could go live in the pigs. And I think there's a lot of, for me, it's almost like being a cannibal. And if you ask the shamans, a lot will tell you, well, if you eat a pig, you're actually resetting your karma in this life. It's like you just reset. You need to start from zero again. And for me, I like to test what people say. They tell me this is good for you. Okay, I'll test it. This is good for me. And I only felt better and better the more I included a non-animal diet. I didn't lack in energy. What I only lacked was inspiration. I found it very hard the first years to transform my carnivorous cooking with basically salt and pepper. Well, I was a good enough cook, but it was very hard to turn over into a vegan diet. And I think that's where most they fall short in a way, because you need to really start going into spices. Not additives, but substitutes, and what vitamins am I getting from this? And it's like a whole science, and you really need to clean out your body and start listening to what do I actually need. And if the body craves eggs, well, then what do I need to eat that does that I don't crave eggs? So for me, it's been a very spiritual journey, and one I'm going to continue. But I'm not so much pro-vegan that I won't eat meat. If I'm one day, you and me, maybe we're in Canada, and there's a farm that has a cow or a bull that he lived a lovely natural life, and he was also taken away from this place in a lovely natural way, then I would eat him with joy. And I think that is my approach to what I take into my body.
Okay, so I would imagine that there are plenty of vegans that would maybe not agree with that.
Yes.
And also, okay, so I'm not going to say too much about where we are, but we're in the south of Spain. We're in Andalusia. Andalusia is, I think, world famous now for kind of like hippie retreats. There's hippie retreats all over the place where you can go and do ayahuasca or do this thing or that thing, that frog poison cleanse or whatever. Yeah, yeah. Do you? I mean, again, I don't want to lead too much. I'd rather you tell your story. But do you want to say anything about the people that you met?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to say specifically who they are, or you want to just keep it general?
I think let's keep it general.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention anyone, but
So I think what I'm trying to get at was these people you met. Was it a positive influence on your life, or was it all positive, or was there some part of it that wasn't positive?
I would say 75% was negative, and 25% was really positive. But I think if we want to and we're mindful, then we can also learn from the negative. Like, what should I not do? Yeah. Like when I came with the example of people trying to sell me ayahuasca, then I'll be a bit reluctant. I'll be like, that's interesting. Is that a religion for you? And for many shamans or people that want to sell me a product, that was actually how I felt. I felt like there was a salesman in front of me, and it was not in my best interest. It was in their interest, and it was often based on money. And
do you want to say a little bit about, I mean, I'm sure that most people will know what ayahuasca is, but do you just want to say a little bit about what this is?
For me, it was a great change. I started with doing mapachu first, which is a tobacco plant from native to South America. And
how far back are we going now?
That's ancient. You can find it from, I think, like 3,000 years ago and more, actually, where they have found these ancient shamans who have like a pouch with both ayahuasca, tobacco, and stuff like this. And they probably also did cambo as well. But ayahuasca is organic. And the difference is from many psychedelics that people use today that ayahuasca is only organic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of psychedelics are, I won't say industrial, but they are chemical, and it's non-organic.
So you're talking about things like LSD, which are man-made or synthesized?
Yeah. I think there's a big difference between taking something that's totally natural and that has gone through a natural process, and then taking something that people make in a lab. You know, like we'll also touch in food, then what is the intention this is being sold with? Are they making this product to have fun? Or are they making this product to help heal you? And most people that make LSD or methamphetamine or other products are probably not doing it for your best interest, or sitting, like you in ayahuasca, the shaman will sit out in the jungle for 2-3 weeks and clear his mind like a meditation, and they will cook this medicine with their greatest intention. And that for me is mindfulness. That for me is a whole package. And you can actually feel this. I used to smoke a lot of weed before, like, you know, and I could always feel which intention it was sold with. Did someone go around singing for their plants, or did someone just grow to sell?
Yeah.
There's a big, big difference in how I felt. I could get angry and frustrated, and I would never buy that place again. Mm-hmm. Or I could go to someone like my good friend in that you met one time. She sings for her plants, and I could feel that. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's the same thing with ayahuasca, drugs, and it's the same with plants and animals.
Yeah. So I think what I was going to ask you, Jasper, was how long ago did you start to, let's say, experiment with things like ayahuasca, and you were talking about mapachu?
Yeah.
Is it mapachu? Mapachu. Was it in this time period 3 years ago in Spain? Yeah. And do you want to say a little bit about that? And basically what I'm trying to do is link it to why you decided to become a vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me everything's connected. It was always on my path.
Yeah.
I've always been very much into the unknown. How much can I develop myself? And ayahuasca seemed natural. I just waited many years until I could find a proper place and proper people to do it with. And I think I was going to become a vegan anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, it was also part of my path. If I'm going to be a vegan in 5 years, I don't know. Yeah. Like, I'm not convinced so much in that way. I just try different things and see if it's beneficial for me and my surroundings. About ayahuasca, is there any specific subject, because it's such a big subject?
Yeah. No, I mean, you don't have to say anything about it. I mean, if you don't want to say anything about it, don't say anything about it. It was more how did this link to veganism?
Well, I don't know if it actually did. But for me, it was a part of my path. And I think when you do, I've done a lot of mind-enhancing drugs in the past as well.
Yeah.
Both as party drugs, but also later on more recreational.
Yeah.
I used to work with, C5, contact with the 5 dimensions and so on. And for me, it became more and more important to be mindful about how I was doing things, and not so much doing things just to have fun or to shut out my surroundings. So I think the next natural step for me was ayahuasca. Mm-hmm. But before I did ayahuasca, I cleaned out for a very long time. Yeah. And I did the frog poison cambo, you know of, that we do to like clean physically and clean blocks. And I did a mapachu many times. Yeah. Which is, for me, probably the greatest therapist there is on the planet. It's not a mind-enhancing experience in that way, but you're very centered in your body and cleaning out we could call past life karma.
Yeah.
It can be karma from your ancestors and yourself, and it's the greatest therapist I have ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Without it, it doesn't go so far that it can be hard to integrate into the body after. But ayahuasca can, for many people, be that because it's so big suddenly.
So, okay, so you met these people, you started to do this kind of thing. You were doing it because, let's say it's part of your spiritual journey, whatever you want to call it, however you want to describe that. And somehow that led you to decide to become a vegan. Yeah. And I know from talking to you that some of these vegans were very active. Yeah. Yeah. You want to say a little bit about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have some friends that they wanted me to join something called Cube of Truth. And they do this all over the world. And I went one time. And I was actually quite... first, I was quite invigorated by it. I thought it was a very good idea. Let's talk to people about this, eating meat. I think it's a very important... but for me, there was a lot more in it than there was for them. Mm-hmm. I'm also an educated NLP therapist. Yeah. And I have a lot of work with self-development. So every time I try to talk with these people about how do we create resistance versus change in others when we're agitating and not attracting, as an example. And a lot of them were reluctant to talk about this. They'd be like, oh, last time we 5 people wanted to change. But inside me, I would think, yeah, but what about the 30 people that you scared away for the next 10 years? I've worked a lot with my own addictions and other people's addictions. And if you talk to an addict, because that's what we are, we're addicted to food. We're addicted to drinking water and stuff like this. And when you start to touch on people's foundation of life in that way, then we need to be very mindful and careful, because else we can postpone the time until they want to change double or even more. And standing with videos from slaughterhouses and all this, and also for children, I think can be quite traumatizing. So I only went one time with them, and I was in a light argument with one of them, and I tried to just stay calm and come with a few examples from my life. And a few of them agreed very much, but keep on going, and doing the same thing. But for me, I'm like, okay, thank you for the experience, and thank you for showing me what not to do.
I think what I'm trying to get to, because I think that this for me is kind of like the interesting point, is where let's say the conversation and or the debate or whatever you want to call it starts, is what was it they were trying to change? What was it they thought that people should change, and why?
They should basically change their foundation of how they consume food in any way. When it comes to milk, meat, dairy, all this.
But why?
Because they believe that it harms animals. And it does. Industrial use of animals does harm a lot. Yeah. And we do consume trauma on a daily basis. Yeah. But I think the interesting point for me is it's not about what life for me is not about what do I know. It's more about what do I not know yet. Yeah. And I think if we start exploring, our plant sentient as well. Yeah. And the most of the vegans that I know actually live a very supermarket dependent life. Yeah. Where there's a lot of plastic pollution. Mm-hmm. A lot of these plants have a horrible life. If we go check, one of Europe's darkest secrets is Costa del Plastico, that starts just over here at Almeria. Yeah. 300 kilometers long, kilometers wide of a plastic sea, more or less. Yeah. And the first time I drove there with my dad, which is actually also partly why I became vegan, this was before I started on the ayahuasca path, I cried. Because I've never seen so much, and I watched a documentary about it, how they are not paid very well. And you see the ecological places are right next to the other places, they interchange, so it's all pesticides. And we have a lot of slave labor there.
Do you want to expand on that, because that's a big claim?
That's a big claim.
Yeah.
But you see a lot of Moroccans down here, a lot of Africans that work, and they don't have a lot of money to send back to their families. And I know this not just from the documentaries, but from talking to people when they sit at the cheapest place they can eat their dinner, or and ask them, well, how is it? Can you actually send money back to your family in Africa? Yeah, every 3 months, but I don't have money to travel back. So we have this interdependency. Yeah. But we sit in our comfortable chairs, in our skyscrapers, and especially we have a lot of rich people here that are not Spanish, and they judge everyone else, and that for me becomes very self-righteous. And I don't think that's a healthy way to create the want to change in others. And also, I don't think it's the most beneficial way to treat the plants.
Okay, so I don't want to go too far off the track here, because I know what you're talking about. I've seen it. I don't know whether the people listening to this will really understand what it is that you've just said, but I mean, literally, it's not a sea, it's an ocean of plastic. These plastic greenhouses. And what's extraordinary for me is that, I mean, I can't back this up with any quotes or facts or statistics, but as far as I know, from what I've read, from what other people have told me, a huge amount of produce is created here in the south of Spain and goes to the rest of Europe. Yeah, so it's like one of the main producers of this kind of stuff. And people go to the supermarket and they see a tomato and they think, oh, wow, lovely, it's a Spanish tomato, the Mediterranean sunshine. They have no idea how it was grown. If they saw how it was grown, they would get a real shock. Yeah, I think that's what you're getting at, yeah?
It is.
Yeah.
Like you started to talk about, that there's both the material aspect and there's the spiritual aspect.
Yeah.
And I believe we are what we eat and how what we eat has been treated.
Yeah.
And when we look at that, and we have slaves...
A lot of people are going to think this guy's barking mad because he's just talking about a plant. I mean, plants don't feel anything, man.
Well, I think they should read a lot on this topic, because there has been a lot of debunking of the more the elder books. There's one called what's it called? I have it on my notes. So sorry. Plants Are Conscious and Sentient. It's by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird. The Sentient Life of Plants. This has been debunked a lot. But later on, now we actually have plant neurobiologists working, and they're proving that plants are conscious and sentient, and they communicate. They have more senses than animals, is actually what we're talking about now. They can emanate. They have a voice. Individual voice. Each plant has an individual voice, which we can actually prove now.
So why are vegans telling us to eat them?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. Yeah. And I think humanity, or rather modern personality, is in a stage of development where we need to change a lot.
Yeah.
How we perceive this, because why are we so angry? Why do we have so much self-righteousness? Why should everyone else change? Why is it the government's fault? Why is it industry's fault? Why is it my mom and dad's fault? It's not. Because I think if we look at it spiritually, or as a Buddhist maybe would, then we would probably say it's not done to you, it's done for you. So we always have this loving example around us, which can seem very destructive for the ignorant party.
Yeah.
But for many people, when we become more and more aware, then it becomes about mindfulness. It becomes about, how do I treat myself? And how do I treat others? And I think it's very hard when we touch the foundation of life. Mm-hmm. Because for most people, it's a journey into the unknown. We don't know better. We are schooled and taught to live like this. And it can become very hard to ask these questions, because we have 3 kids, we need to provide. But it becomes this basic self-righteousness. And it doesn't take a lot to start growing self. And I know even in Denmark we have local markets from local farmers, where you can go and buy local produce, which does not support plastic pollution, at least not in the same way. I think only UK supermarkets in 2018 was over 900,000 tons of plastic. That's only in the UK, 900,000 tons of plastic. That's a lot. And when I hear vegans telling us, oh, you should do this and this, then in my head I'm going, okay, but are you going to these local markets and buying local produce? Because 9 out of 10 are not. 9 out of 10 are eating industrial processed sugar. Like, but what I'm doing is all right because I'm saving the animals. Yeah, but what about all the plants? What about all the slave labor? What about all the plastic pollution that you go down and buy every day in the supermarket? So instead of being self-reliant or relying on other people around you, it becomes dependency. A parasitic dependency.
Okay, so I actually find this quite easy to follow all the threads of this, because we've talked about this and I've thought about it a lot, but I want to try and like tie it all together for listeners, because really, let's say the key points for me, I don't know whether it's, instead of saying vegan or let's say plant-based diet or something like this, I don't know whether it's better to say omnivorous versus carnivorous, or actually let me think. Yeah, I just need to think about this for a minute. So I would put forward a case that we are omnivorous, but I know that I've heard vegans put forward a case that this maybe used to be true, but let's say humankind has evolved to a point now where we don't need that we can actually make a choice. We don't need to eat meat. I don't know where the science is on this. I don't know where scientists are on this, but it seems to me that actually to have a healthy body, eating meat wouldn't be a bad thing. Now, I know that you've said to me that, okay, I think the phrase that you've used, you're an example of someone who can show that you don't need to eat meat to be healthy. Yeah, that you can just eat plants. So do you want to unpack that for people? Because I mean, really what I'm getting at here is, but I don't want to colour this conversation too much with my own let's say beliefs, my own dogmatic beliefs about this. Okay, I've thought about it quite a lot. I've changed my opinion about some things. There's certainly some things that I didn't realise, and also I think for me there was just some stuff that I'd forgotten about. Like stuff that I knew 10, 20, 30 years ago that I'd found out and incorporated into my life, and then I just forgot. I just got lazy and I forgot about all of this stuff. I needed reminding. Yeah. So just so that it's clear for you and clear for everyone else, I certainly don't support the industrialized meat industry, the way that meat is manufactured. I've thought less about how vegetables, like how let's say plant-based foods are produced, but the more I see, the less I like. Yeah. Okay. I think what it comes down to for me, because I was a vegetarian, I wasn't vegan. I was a vegetarian for very, very many years, and actually, the honest truth about vegetarianism, my experience of it, because I knew quite a few vegetarians as well, because they had an influence on me and made me think, and actually in the end that's why I became a vegetarian. But when I think about it, when I'm honest, when I look back on it, they were some of the most unhealthy people I knew. They were also some of the most emotionally unstable people that I knew. And eventually it got to a point where I craved meat. And eventually I went back to eating it, and I felt so much better when I started to eat it. That's the honest truth, yeah, from my perspective. I think where I am now is I hardly eat meat at all. I do enjoy eating meat. I try my hardest when I do get meat to get meat that has had a good life and has been humanely killed. Yeah, it's very difficult, especially here in Spain. I think that from what I understood, especially about America, in America it's much, or let's say North America, it's much easier to get these kind of grass-fed beef products, and where you can actually be 100% certain that these animals had been looked after humanely and slaughtered humanely. So I know that in North America it's much easier to get these products. Here in Spain, not so easy. Maybe some Spanish people would disagree with me. Maybe I just haven't been able to get into the know. Like I don't have the right connections and haven't met the right people. But to go to a supermarket here locally or a butcher locally and get proper grass-fed beef, it's a lottery. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah, or maybe the person selling it to you's understanding of what humane is very, very different to what your understanding of humane is. Yeah, so it's not easy. So my solution to this is that I eat very little meat, but I still eat it, and actually I don't have an ethical problem with it. I think that there are so many different, let's say, body types throughout the world, and I don't think it's necessarily related to race or genetics or anything like that. I just think that sometimes it's the luck of the draw. Some people are able to only eat plant-based food, and they're totally okay. Others, if they did that, they would probably get a little bit sick. I know that's really contentious. I know there's a lot of, let's say, vegan activists or people who are advocating for plant-based diet that would totally disagree with that. But just experientially, from my own personal experience, that's what I find to be true. Okay. And the other thing that I don't want to say too much because I want to hear what you have to say about this. But I just want to kind of like make sure that we're on a level playing field here. That you know exactly what I think. This whole idea of plant-based, it really confuses me because when I look at my plate, the food, maybe there's 10 different types of food on my plate. Let's say I'm having stir-fried rice. Yeah. Okay. There'll be lots of vegetables, rice. Almost all of it is plant-based, and then there'll be a small amount of meat. Yeah. So if by that definition, I'm on a majority plant-based diet.
Yeah.
And I think most people are.
I think many people are, but you should not confuse plant-based with vegan.
Yeah.
Because it's not the same. It really isn't. But I think what is healthy to touch upon is that one of the arguments I've heard is that vegans say that the meat is decomposing when you consume it. Yeah. But if let's just work with the assumption that animals and plants both are sentient, which we can actually prove today scientific. Maybe even plants are more sentient than animals and us, which I think is very interesting. Well, anything that from the moment you cut it down, is decomposing. Yeah.
I've got to just say one thing. Sorry to interrupt you, because that people check out. I don't know if you'll find this, but just go to YouTube and check out a band from Brighton from back in the day called The Hat, And when I say back in the day, it's got to be at least like 2005 or something like that. And they had a track called The Machine, and I'm sure there's recording of it on YouTube. They did it. There was an album with this track, and there was also some live shows that they did. They're phenomenal band, absolutely phenomenal band. And it's a poem. It's like a, or let's say a story. It's probably like a 10 page story set to music about a machine that proved that plants are sentient. It's fantastic. But anyway, The Hat, and it's called The Machine, from Brighton.
I have to hear that one day as well.
Yeah.
I think what is very important about this debate is that a lot of people will do a big leap. Like someone wants to be vegan. They'll do a big leap and they'll be in some kind of religious conviction. Like everyone else should change, just like when someone stops to smoke. And what does that do to their surroundings? Well, it creates resistance versus change. And why do we do that? As a person, we do that because we have a dependency. It's in psychology, they would call it symbiotic behavior, where actually, if we look in nature, we would call it parasitic behavior. We're experiencing at other people's expense. And it's actually based on fear of change and ignorance. So how do we actually do something about this? Well, we do small steps, and we do not expect others to do the change for us. So for me, it has been many small steps to where I am now. And to where I want to be, there's a million small steps. Because every time that we do this great leap of change, like stop smoking tomorrow, then often what we find out is that the modern personality is very addicted, is very dependent. And that we actually, either we change the addiction with something else to fill the same void we have, or we go straight back. And the only way we can actually, how I have experienced and what I have from my studies seen that we can actually do about this, is stop the agitation and start being an example ourselves. It's about attraction, being the example, small steps, because that works. It's like you mentioned earlier about evolving. And me, I have a big issue with the word evolution. Okay. Because it's Darwinism, which tells us that, well, the whole world changes and you do not need to be responsible about it because it will change anyway. And I think when we look at the two words...
That's a huge claim, Jasper.
It is. I know it's a huge claim, and it's something that I touch more upon in some of my writings. Yeah. But I think the way that we often phrase things as modern personalities, there's issues in them, linguistic issues. I'm not saying Darwin was only wrong, but the way that it's being industrialized today is not healthy for the way that we perceive ourselves. Mm-hmm. But when we look at development, then you need to be responsible about your self-development. But you do not necessarily need to be responsible about evolution. And this is like, do we take responsibility for lives ourselves? Or do we expect industry to change? The government, our mom and dad? No, that's not change. Mm-hmm. That's force. So we need to be the change. And for me, that's at least how I try to live my life. I get why we are dependent on supermarkets. And I get why we depend on farms and slave labor and all this. I'm not saying it's positive. Yeah. And I get why people do it and why we continue to do it. But we need to tone it down. Because else in 100 years or maybe less, then there won't be much earth left to actually live from. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that I shop in the supermarket sometimes. But most of the time I go to here in Spain we call it fruteria. Yeah. I'll go to the local shop where I can buy local produce, where there's less plastic pollution. Yeah. It's not about being perfect, but it's about always including small steps instead of saying what everything I do is perfect, because then we exclude the possibility of change. And that's when we start to being self-righteous and judging other people. Yeah. And I think that is also a very spiritual aspect. but also a modern psychological aspect.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I think probably I've watched about 10, maybe even 15 films or documentaries, and also listened to watched podcasts around this topic. So this topic of food and veganism and the meat industry and this whole thing, the way that it all links together. I in my own head, I have quite a clear map of how it all links together. It's taken some time for that map to form. And if I was going to try to pick one fact that has been put forward that kind of really, really made me think, okay, so if that fact is true, if it can be backed up, then we really, really need to do something. Yeah. So when I say we, I'm talking about humankind. It would be this fact, and that is that there are people saying, and I'm just going to have to right from the off say that anyone listening to this should go off and check this for themselves, find out who said it, where it originally came from, is it a fact, or is it provable science, or all of that kind of thing. But what's been said is that if we carry on, so if humankind carry on farming in the way that we're farming at the moment, there's only 60 years of topsoil left, because topsoil is eroding at such an alarming rate that there'll only be 60 years of harvests left. And then after that, it won't be possible to grow anything on this planet anymore. There won't be any topsoil. Now, I want to come back to that, because for me it's the crucial point. But the way that this is all linked together in my head, anyway, I don't want to invite people into my mind too much, but there's links between health, so what you eat and how healthy you are. There's links between big business, like industry, farming, the fishing industry, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, all of this kind of industry. There's almost like religious movements, like people who advocate for meat and people who advocate for veganism. It's almost become like a religion. Every single documentary or film or book or article or podcast that I've read that has been, let's say, influential, has been debunked, and then the debunking has been debunked. So, it's quite possible that, this whole idea about 60 harvests left is just rubbish. Maybe I have been sold a line, like someone has said something that is completely not true and not provable, but it sounds very scary. But if it's true, and it seems that it comes from some very, let's say, knowledgeable and experienced people, that's worrying. And for me, that is that's where my interest in this really, really picked up. Now, I can say a little bit more about that, but this is not so much about what I think. So you tell me if that triggers anything that you want to say. If not, I carry on.
Okay. I think it's a hard subject to touch because, like you say, like fact and science and knowledge, and I think we have a lot of modern theories based on science and fact. And often what that does is exclude a whole array of information that is very valid. Yeah. And I think that's important because I hear a lot of people talking about climate change, CO2 pollution. And I often hear people around me talking about, we're too many people on the planet. But I think when you look at the non-habited areas right now, like in Russia, Siberia, great forests, we have all huge areas that we don't use for anything at all. And so I think, like the 60 years of topsoil, I put a lot more faith and belief in nature than obviously most scientists do. Okay. I think we could eradicate ourselves in that way, but
through soil erosion.
Yeah. I think that is a very important issue, which comes with industrial agriculture, pesticides and stuff like this, and especially the way we do it.
So monocropping and desertification. And
exactly. Like we see many places here in Spain, like all over. I think it's probably less in the north. We do have smarter farmers up there somewhere, and but I also see there's a whole movement about people that are talking about local grown, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, and so there's also the other movement where. But I think as long as you live a dependent life on supermarkets and everyone else to do the work for you, and you don't even have tomatoes in your back garden or on your porch, then you will be in the losing end in less than 60 years. Because this cannot continue, and it should not continue. And especially if we assume that plants are sentient, then the mass killing of plants, insects, and so on is a lot more than it is of animals. So yes, I believe Mother Earth is hurting a lot, and I actually think that the lesser issue is actually animals.
You think it's the lesser issue?
Yeah.
And that's coming from a vegan?
That's coming from a vegan, yes. I think that the bigger issue is actually plants and insects and natural life. I believe that is the bigger issue. Of course, this is also wrong, especially the industrial use of animals is super, super, super wrong. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that we are very, very, very ignorant. Because a lot of people will take science and fact as a religion. Yeah. And they'll be like you say, they advocate this and this and this and that. Yeah. And it becomes more about what they know now or they think they know, but not about how much information can we include for a better future. It's like it's totally out of their perspective. It's only about advocating their convictions. Yeah. And that for me is a huge issue also. I love science. I think it's great to prove many things, but more to prove what we haven't proven yet than what we already think we have proven. Mm-hmm. Because it's, for me, it's always about the unknown.
Okay, so look, I tell you what I want to do. I want to just, I don't know if I can do this. I'm going to try. I just want to paint a picture of how I see this. And I'm interested in any comment you have about it and any fault you see with it. And actually, before I even start this, I kind of know what the downside of it is. So I'll get to it. I'll get to the downside of what I'm proposing because I know there is a downside. Okay. Experientially. So when I say experientially, I'm talking about from my own experience. You know, like from what I've actually seen for myself. I just cannot see that there's any sense at all in saying that human beings are herbivores or that we're evolving into herbivores or that we have evolved into herbivores and that we should not eat meat. Okay, I think that it's a very big trap to generalize. You know, like if we start to generalize about all of this, then it's problematic. And what I mean by this is that what is good for one person may definitely not be good for another person. So a very good example of this would be someone like Michaela Peterson, who is Jordan Peterson's daughter. And She's a young woman. She's a young mother. You know, she's in her 20s, I guess, and she's married with a young kid. However, she's had an incredibly difficult childhood and early adulthood because, as far as I know, she's had several operations. She's had, I think, replacement ankle, or it may be, I think maybe replacement ankle and hip, because of diseases that she had. Okay, and actually, in the end, after taking all sorts of medications and doing all sorts of treatments, she's been able to manage this particular condition by only eating grass-fed meat. Yeah, by let's say eating meat that has lived, the animals have lived out in pastures and have not been factory farmed, have not been filled with vitamin shots and whatever. Yeah, and so she's an example of one person, and I'm sure that she's not unique. I'm sure there are other people in the same situation as her who actually, for her, it's really, really beneficial just to eat meat. Yeah, and I'm sure that there are examples of people that, like if they eat meat, it completely plays havoc with the balance in their own individual system, and it's much better for them if they just eat plants. Yeah. So when we start to generalize and say you shouldn't eat meat or you shouldn't eat, it becomes dangerous, because I think there's too many variants and too many variables, and people are so different, and they're so different for so many different reasons, yeah, that it becomes dangerous to do. But just from my own personal experience, I feel at my best when I eat a really, really, really varied diet. Yeah, when I'm eating lots and lots and lots of different types of things, and when those things are fresh, not processed food, no processed food at all, and I don't know why, but just to me, it's common sense. It's just logic that you're gonna feel better when you do that. It's not always easy to do it because these products are very expensive sometimes, and also they're not always easy to find. I mean, I'm still shocked when I go into a supermarket or when I go into a food shop. Like, I don't know what percentage, but a huge percentage of what is on the shelves is processed food with processed sugar and all sorts of stuff that everybody should know is really bad for you. But you look at people's shopping trolleys and they're chocked full of this stuff.
I could not eat anything in that trolley. I would faint and pass out for a day.
Yeah. But I think what it is that I want to get to here is that if I understood a lot, let's say these activist vegans, they're advocating for like a complete ground zero, like take us back to the Stone Age kind of thing, like stop factory farming, stop the whole farming industry that has evolved around that. So, like growing crops that feed livestock and using huge amounts of land to do that, and keeping animals in pens, like we
used to do.
Yeah, exactly. So they're advocating to stop all of that and to not farm meat at all. Okay, so the downside of that, as far as I can see, is what are you going to do with the billions and billions and billions of
the billions of animals.
Yeah. What I was saying is that if we go back to that scenario where we just completely stop the food industry, let's say the way that factory farming, if we just stop that immediately, what happens to those, let's say, millions and millions, probably billions of cows on the planet?
Billions.
Yeah. What do we do with them? And sorry, because I just want to finish sort of like painting this picture, because I think that actually, for me, the logical thing is that we go back to farming techniques which were probably used, let's say, pre-20th century, where, and probably the early part of the 20th century in many places, where plants and animals lived on the same farm, and they rotated crops and they rotated the animals around the farm, so that the animals were never in the same place for more than a day or two, a few days or more, and that there was so much biodiversity that on these farms there was they weren't just monocropping, they weren't just growing wheat or soy or mangoes or avocados or whatever. They were growing all sorts of different things. Now, I'm not a farmer. I mean, I've got a little bit of farming history in that my uncle owned a farm, and so I spent time on a farm when I was younger. So I seen something about farming, but I'm not a farmer. I'm not an agriculturist at all. But just it makes so much sense to me that is obviously the way to go. It's going to stop erosion. It's going to stop this desertification that's happening. And it's going to mean that animals that we have will have humane lives, and there's hopefully a bigger chance that they're going to be killed humanely as well. Like the whole process could revert back to being more humane, and then there would not even be let's say, a spiritual problem with eating meat. It's not going to be something that is karmically devastating for you. And I think the last sentence I want to say, and then I'm going to hand it totally over to you, is that the other thing that I think that is totally obvious is that when you farm a monocrop, so whether it's soy or wheat or mangoes or avocados, all of these things that we've been talking about, actually you end up killing probably billions of insects. And these insects, especially, I mean, I don't want to only talk about one insect, but let's say especially bees are important, but all of these insects are important to, let's say, the balance of things in nature, and yet billions of them get killed through monocropping, and somehow this is seen to be okay. Like that those animal lives are not as important as the lives of a cow or of a sheep or of a pig or of a chicken. Yeah. Now I find that really difficult to comprehend, because who made that judgment? Who says that a bee is less important than a cow? Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I agree that all life is equal. It doesn't matter if you're a child or a grown-up, a man or woman, an insect or a tree or a cow. For me, I think it's about respect. And I do think, just to touch what you said about the vegan solution is to, in a way, stop everything. I do think there are vegans out there that try to come with solutions, like to phase out things instead of just do a full stop, because that would also be very horrible. What should we do with all the animals? Should we just make mass graves?
And what do the farmers do?
Exactly. We actually call this, when you say something and you don't have a solution yourself, that is what we call an agitator. So it can be very good for an agitator in a political or sociological environment, because they bring a general grievance to the, we could say, like the forefront.
Into the public domain.
Exactly, but it's not done in a very healthy way. Let's call it that. That's why we need innovators, because they come with the actual solutions. And that's why we also need orchestrators, because orchestrators facilitate the action from the innovator. So there's like this whole of it, but it becomes very much.
Can you give any examples of innovators and orchestrators in this particular field? You know, are you talking about things like permaculture and?
Yeah, exactly. I think many people start out with being agitators.
Yeah.
And we can fulfill more roles the more we grow. But looking at actual solutions, I don't think I have any actual solutions other than what I want to for myself. Is that if, like you talk about the grass-fed beef from, let's say, North America.
Yeah.
Well, for me, if the cow or the bull or the pig, don't touch the pigs, but if the animal doesn't have a working job, a function, and its only function is to be to be eaten, that for me is an issue.
Yeah.
But if like I remember when I was a kid in Denmark, we had sheep, and we had this one sheep called Petra. She was very unintelligent, and one day she choked herself around a tree, and the next day we brought her to the slaughterhouse, and within a short time we ate Petra. And that for me is a very conscious and beneficial way to consume meat. She had a good life. She ended herself.
Yeah.
And she tasted fine.
Yeah.
And we got nutrition from it. But I think it's important to go back to that. Like you say, no more monocultures. And animals also need to have a function. But we should not have... Like in Denmark, we have more pigs than we have human beings. And I think that is a huge issue. And when more or less all of these pigs are actually living what I would not call a beneficial life, then we also have a karmic issue. And that's where that becomes a big spiritual aspect, which I think is very unhealthy for us. You know, a lot of people say, I hear this so many times, I won't give up bacon. But actually, most of fear of change is based on ignorance. Because I can make tasty bacon. Well, I'm not so good at, but one of my friends, Hannah, she can make tasty bacon out of carrots. And it's about learning more about food, because like Denmark, where I'm from, basically I often make jokes and I call it the salt and pepper country. Because that's more or less the only spices most people, or at least meat eaters, use. Salt and pepper, and the third spice is salt and pepper combined. You know, and if you want to do something more with your life, I think it's about learning how to cook properly. And it's not about getting a wife that can do it or getting a mom to do it. It's about, can I do this myself? And yes, I can, if I teach myself. I think you've tasted some of my raw vegan candy. Yeah. And I, for my own opinion, think that it's actually better.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah, I think that's actually better, and it's more filling.
Yeah.
Because I can taste if people enjoy cooking or not.
Yeah.
And most people that I know that cook meat, not everyone, but most that I know, they're lousy cooks. Mm-hmm. Because there's a part of mindfulness that's just gone for them. Yeah. And they don't think about the other spices or like putting your intention into the cooking. But for me, it's actually, it's almost a ritual. Yeah. I enjoy doing a porridge where I have to stir it for an hour. I can put so much intention in it, and people can taste this after. So I think there's both a material and spiritual aspect to it. And we need to go back to including spirituality instead of excluding it.
We'll say a bit more about that then.
About including spirituality?
Yeah.
Well, like you say, I think it's about going backwards to be able to go forwards again. And I think we should not look so much into the written history, because like many people know today, the victor writes the history. Mm-hmm. But I think we should go back to not everyone, there's not room for everyone having a farm, or maybe there actually is. I haven't done the math on it. I actually believe there would be room for every family in the world to have a farm if we spread out. And what is it we're teaching our kids? We're teaching them a dependent life. Like, I'll come with a good example of how I lived a dependent life. When I was about 24 to 25, they gave me 4 to 5 different diagnoses. They gave me medication, so I almost died several times. Experimental medication. And I had great trust in doctors, medicine, science, and government. So much that I was fully convinced they only had my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
But I had to realize one day that if I kept on seeing myself as sick for the rest of my life and needing all these medications every day, then I would not live a very long time. So from one day to the next, actually, I stopped with the medication. And what I mostly stopped with was drinking sodas and processed sugar. And I think within a few years, I realized that stopping processed sugars and sodas and these artificial candies, it took away 80 to maybe 90% of all symptoms that most people would give you a diagnosis for. And anyone that have ever asked to try this have said the exact same thing within a week to two, that, wow, Jasper, I didn't realize it was so freaking simple. And this is what actually we're teaching our kids. Yeah, do like me. Or do we want to teach them to put their hands into the ground and learn about self-sufficiency or self-reliance? Come back into contact with nature, to contact with ourselves, because that's what we're losing. Most people would not be able to survive 14 days if they didn't have a supermarket. Most people can't even fish, neither alone grow anything. But it's not because it's hard. I've tried to grow potatoes and onions. It's super freaking easy.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot harder to sit and discuss these things on the internet with other people, which we use a lot of energy on. But actually just going out using 10 minutes and throwing a potato into the ground, that's beneficial.
Yeah.
And it's a good example for the next generations, because if we want to continue this life, well, it's not about us. It's about the next generations. And I want to be able to sit as a 90-year-old and be consciously happy about the life I lived. I might not be living perfect, but I still want to be able to ask the questions and be inspired by the young people. Because we're only laying the bricks for the next generation. It doesn't matter what we think we know. We need to lay the bricks for the next generation. It's about what we don't know yet.
Talking about the next generation and the younger generation, let's say, unfortunately, what comes to my mind immediately is Greta Thunberg.
Oh man, are you sure you want to go there?
I'm not sure I want to go there, but I do see that there's a huge link between these things, because there's this whole environmental issue, like deforestation and global warming and all the rest of this kind of thing. And there's a huge link between how we farm and where we get our food from and those issues. It's debatable. It's debatable science. Some will say it's hard fact. Then someone else will debunk it. And it's very difficult for, like someone like me to be sure what's true and what's not true. Yeah. I have a feeling about it. I have let's say there are some things that sound more reasonable than others. Okay. It does not sound reasonable to me that let me say this as simply and as in a short way as possible without going off into a wild tangent. But I don't think that what Greta Thunberg and the huge PR organised PR campaign that she's got behind her. This was no accident. It wasn't some teenager who just walked out of school one day and went on strike, and started to to use the fact that she could walk out of school and strike to try and change the world. This was a really, really hugely thought out PR campaign, and it's like we've talked about with many other things. You just got to follow the money. You follow the money, and eventually you get to the destination of where all of this started. And this huge industries behind, let's say, environmental issues. Okay, a lot of people have invested in industries which, and a lot of people stand to make a lot of money if we follow Saint Greta. You know, like if we buy into what it is that she's proposing. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to a lot of people. You know, like it's really not reasonable stuff that is being put forward. It's not sensible stuff. And I mean, more reasonable and more sensible stuff, you know, like, for example, the fishing industry globally, I think that they're probably more culpable than the meat industry. I think they're causing more damage to the environment than the meat industry is. And actually, it's probably one of the simplest things to fix. Okay, so when I say simple to fix, that's if everyone bought into the solution and actually did it. And that is that we designate certain areas of the oceans as no fish zones for a certain amount of years. And it actually, from what I understood, it's, you know, not like the next 50 years. It's like 3 or 4 or 5 years. You don't fish these areas, and the fish stocks come back. Yeah.
Nature regenerates at a very fast rate.
Yeah. And actually, if there was some way of globally managing the fishing industry, as opposed to it being just a big free-for-all, it's not regulated, or they say it's regulated, but it doesn't seem to be very successfully regulated, and then there could be a substantial change, you know, very, very fast. Yeah. And I think it's the same, from what I understand, looking at the arguments that I think sound the most reasonable, that if we were somehow able to, over a period of like the next 10 to 50 years, to return to, because it is a return, it's not something new, to return to kind of like regenerative farming practices, then there would be the first thing is that we wouldn't need to eat so much meat. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a problem. I think that I think possibly, I don't know if the data exists, I don't know if there's accurate data about this, but I think probably we eat more meat than we need to. I think that's there's no need for so much meat to be slaughtered. Okay, so I think that if we went back to a regenerative style of farming, there wouldn't be so much meat available. That would be the first thing, because these herds of animals would have to graze around a farm, or, you know, like a geographic area, and that would be their job, exactly as you said. They would have a job, yeah, and their job wouldn't be to just exist for 7 months to provide steaks. Yeah, they would live a life, a social life in a herd for some years, and eventually maybe they would be slaughtered for food, yeah, humanely. So there wouldn't be so much meat available. So actually, a lot of the issues that people are saying that, you know, we overeat certain meat products, I mean, that would seem to solve itself if we go back to it. That's just one small example of, you know, like how I think what I'm trying to get to is that it's more about finding a balance and equilibrium, letting things come back into some kind of balance.
I think over 50 years, yes.
Yeah.
It's because it's a long haul, because.
But that's a small amount of time in terms of like humankind.
It is, but people perceive it within their life frame. You know, they'll be like, oh wow, this is half of my life, or I'm already 60. But I think we need to very much acknowledge how many people depend on the job they have right now. And I think the key word is monetization, because there are so much big issues with money in the world, and who has the money, and how is it delegated among the people, and which countries have it, which country do not, and because there is no us, it's a me. It's very ego, and we need to profit on this, and we need to, like you mentioned, Greta Thunberg, before she was put out into the scene. There was a whole range of industries already with new vegan products, yeah, it's great. But most of those ice creams have processed sugars. A lot of it has plastic pollution. So is it better? No, for sure it's not.
It's PR, yeah, it's just marketing.
Exactly, and I don't know actual facts about Greta Thunberg, but I researched her quite a bit after, because I had a sense that something was off.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of facts about her, and like you said, striking from school and all this, and when she did her talks in, was it Stockholm? I can't remember. That she's very unapproachable and always protected, and some follow the yellow brick road, follow the money, seem to be very interesting, and also very troubling. But I think what we need to look at is money and how we delegate it among people. Because right now, well, it goes to war, it goes to big industries, and it goes to medicinal industries, while people stay super ignorant. Most people don't know that, you can create antibiotics yourself from this and this and this. We do actually have doctors and professors touching on this and telling people, well, you can use this weed in your back garden to do this. And people are like, what? That's a weed. Yeah, but it also works like this. You were just told it was a weed. And we need to return from this very ignorant and dependent state where we believe everything that is told us from people that has one education. But how much actual mindfulness experience do they have in their life other than advocating one case? Because that for me becomes, I love talking to knowledgeable people like yourself. But when people like a dentist will come and tell me fluoride is good for you, and I can tell from personal experience, I used a lot of time to research this, and I was talking to the Danish Dentist Association, and I kept on formulating very specific linguistics to ask them specific questions. And in the end, they had to turn me over to their head of communication, and I asked them, how do you base these decisions? What research is it based on? And every single paper he linked me was ancient. It was very biased. There was not any objectivity in it. And that for me is very troublesome, because that's what we see all around us. And I get why people become a dentist, a doctor, you become a butcher, whatever. But we need to go back to other values.
Okay, you're firing off all sorts of neurons in my head here. I'm not sure which path to follow here. Okay, one thing that I was thinking about that came into my head when you were saying this is that it's very clear to me that, and I think this is totally reasonable. I think it's totally understandable that people are busy. And they want to go to a supermarket quick and buy something cheap, and they would prefer that cheap thing that they're going to buy to actually be quite good as well, good quality. They want cheap, good quality. And this is what is driving most of these industries, okay? Competition to provide something that is going to be an acceptable quality at a very low price, yeah. And I think the other part of this, the other thing that I was thinking about is that there seems to be a kind of a big contradiction in where, let's say, the plant-based diet advocates are going. Let's, vegans, vegetarians, whatever, because actually from what I can see, most of the products that are coming out of that kind of advocacy are really, really expensive. And I've actually heard, people that are advocating for these kind of products saying that they know that they're expensive, and that they know that, for sure in developing countries, it wouldn't be possible for people to go onto a plant-based diet. It just economically it wouldn't be viable. They don't have the infrastructure that for these products to even be imported to these countries or created in these countries. So it seems a bit elitist. It seems, to me, it seems very elitist. It's like there's a few of us in the Western world that have got a lot of time on our hands and a lot of money, and we can afford to be holier than thou and tell everyone else how they should be living, and we'll do it, but they can't afford it yet. It seems mad to me. I don't know if you can follow that.
I can. I have, let's say, experience, but also quite strong opinions about it.
Yeah. Tell me.
I think Africa is a good example.
Yeah.
Because Africa has a lot of resources in many places, but many places the people are taught to be dependent on emergency help.
Yeah.
From Europe and other countries. And when you have a whole people that end up like that, well, then you also have someone you can point your fingers at. Or you have a place that you can take from their natural resources, which they don't know yet how to get up. And that is actually a way industry does. That's how we've done with oil, with diamonds, gold, many things. And so we take the value from the people and we create an industrial dependency. And I think like you said, Nick, about the plant-based diets. I wrote a few notes here about what's called the impossible burger.
The
impossible burger.
It's not the improbable burger, the impossible burger. Yeah.
Because it's one of these plant-based burgers which many have eaten and say it's amazing, but actually it's filled with GMO. And what it also says is chemical additives. It has a blood-like substitute that is genetically modified bacteria that are fed carbohydrates from pesticide-dependent industrial agriculture. And it's not adequately tested for human consumption. And when I hear this, I'm like...
So where did you get that information from?
I got this information from the article, which we can link after, from Andre Lou.
Okay.
He writes about plant sentience and the impossible burger.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the best articles I've read in a long time.
So his name is Andre Lou, and the website that you pulled up is ecofarmingdaily.com, all one word, ecofarmingdaily.com, and it's an article that is called Opinion, Plant Sentience and the Impossible Burger.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting because he touches about this book I talked about earlier. What was the name? The Sentient Life of Plants. But he also goes on to talk about how we have researchers today that are actually researching what science would previously debunk. And we're actually finding out, well, you might have debunked it, but actually we can find it to be true today.
Yeah.
And they come with a brilliant example, I think, that if you step on one plant, then the plants will remember that you stepped on it. So the next time they're afraid of you. Plants are so sentient that when you actually read these articles about how they test memory and all this about plants, that I'm like, wow. It is actually true what I think most of us actually already know, that plants are a lot smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah, I got to process this live, and I've got to think about this live, because it's not okay. I think that I want to ask in a minute. I want to ask you to say what you think. I've just got to move the mouse. Doesn't fall asleep. What you think sentient means. Okay, so like from a personal point of view, I've thought about this a lot over the years. I've practiced Buddhism for many years, and there is this all-encompassing idea within Buddhism, many types of Buddhism, that what we do should benefit sentient beings. And actually, the ultimate would be to be beneficial to all sentient beings in all times and directions. So it's a big deal, sentience. And actually, I was listening to a Buddhist teacher the other day, and he said something that blew my mind and that I'd never thought about. And this is why I'm asking you now, because it's something that I'm thinking about. I've been thinking about over the last week or so, and I still can't get my head around it. Okay, but what he was saying is that in actual fact, inside all of us, each one of us as an individual, there are billions of sentient beings. That all of these different microbes that we have in our gut, for example, they're all sentient. I never thought about this, and I'm not even sure if I believe it or can get my head around it. Okay, that in like a single cell amoeba, or like a single cell microbe, or even a multi-celled microbe is sentient. But what he was saying was that, for example, when I sit down to meditate, these billions of sentient beings meditate with me, and when I'm eating food and enjoying my food, they're also enjoying it. And actually, if you want to be beneficial to some sentient beings, the best thing that you can do is eat healthy food and eat mindfully. It's even more related to eating mindfully than it is to whether your food is bio, or all of this kind of stuff, which again is mind blowing. I'm still thinking about it, but this idea that these things are sentient, because for me, sentience was linked with this idea that a being felt something and somehow processed that feeling into a decision or a reaction. They reacted to it, and they made some kind of decision. Yeah, there's some kind of thought process, some kind of understanding. And the idea that microbes can think it through and make a decision, I can't get my head around it.
Why not?
I know, but this is why I'm asking you what you think sentient means, because I can't get my head around it.
No, I'm also just asking as like more general question, like why not? Because it's very, I think, me included, I also have a very scientific approach, like, oh, where's the fact in that? But it's like, why not? Because it's always about what we don't know yet. Yeah. Like, how much information can I include, and is it beneficial? Or do I experience resistance when someone says something? And like, why do I do that? Well, it comes from fear, because of fear of change. Yeah. And why should plants not be sentient? Why should microorganisms not be sentient just because they're smaller than us, or because we haven't looked at it in the right microscope yet? And
well, I know that I'm totally down on this when it comes to things, when it comes to fungi and mycelium and mushrooms.
Exactly.
And I don't know whether this is an erroneous way to think about it, but I don't think of them as plants. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe there's I don't know, a biologist out there who's going to tell me that for sure mushrooms are plants. But I figured that they're kind of a group. You've got living beings. Okay, no, scrub that. Scrub that. You've got let's say animal life, plant life, and mushrooms. It's like they're the third group, as far as I can see. So I'm totally down with that with mushrooms. For sure, I can see like mycelial networks are something that have they're like neural networks. They can think, they can make decisions, they can problem solve.
Plants have that.
I don't know why I can accept that, but I can't accept that plant. I don't get it with plants. Sorry, I just don't get it.
No, but plants actually have the same connection. And I think, like, if you think of it like a Buddhist for a moment, then I think that we perceive that everything is connected beyond all universes.
Yeah.
So if we perceive it as a mycelium network, everything is connected, well, then everything we can perceive is sentient. Even this wooden rod in your house, or the cement brick, which comes from nature and so on, even though we made it quite chemical today, but everything is sentient. Why? Just because it doesn't vibrate at the same frequency we do and so
Okay,
on?
now you lost me.
Yeah, I know, but I believe that everything is connected and everything is in a way sentient. I'm not saying that, but we can measure vibrations in the earth. We can measure things in plants, you know. I think we as humans sometimes think that we are so smart, but we're not. Who doesn't say that your house plant does not have a lot more consciousness than you and me? And
so where is this going? If plants are sentient and animals are sentient, what can we eat? And or is it that we've just got to eat mindfully? So, like, you know, like, I can't tell you the North American indigenous tribe, but, you know, like, there's many stories about North American indigenous people that the way that they hunt, the way that they kill animals, it's with, you know, like, utmost respect and reverence for that individual animal. You know, it's like they're killing a brother or something like this. There's countless stories about this. So you're saying that, you know, like, if we were educated from an early age to actually hunt and farm our own food and do it in a mindful way, then, so how does that work? How do you see that? I mean, how do you see that, like, panning out in the next 50 years? Because, you know, there's things like
I don't see
right.
I don't see it panning out because I think, including myself, we're too stuck in our ways. But I think we need to acknowledge we're stuck in our ways before we can actually develop towards that.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be, like I started to say, like, small steps with addicts. It's going to be very small steps, and we need to start looking at how do we pack in these stuff, like plastics.
Yeah.
Stop the plastic industry, and then after that we can start looking at the meat industry. Okay, well, but it's a consumer choice. It's a consumer conscious choice. Because if we weren't buying the products, the industry wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So I think a good example of what you just said, like, is the Aboriginal way. They go out into nature and allegedly they can ask Mother Nature, and whatever animal is growing old comes to them. I think there's a bit stutter in it.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I like the example from, I was quite judgmental some years ago with my ex-girlfriend. She was from the, what do you call it in English? The Faroese Islands?
Yeah, the Pharaohs.
The Faroes, yeah.
Yeah.
She was from the Faroe Islands.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, look at how you're killing these whales. This is horrible. And she got quite mad at me.
What kind of whales are they?
Grind whales.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I actually sat down and listened to what she told me, and I researched it. And they don't kill more than they need, and they don't overconsume. So they actually do it in a quite respectful way. It's not like they're just selling it or sending it off anywhere. You can't just go there as a tourist and get that. And I thought, like, well, okay, that's a very mindful way to do it, actually. They're trying to live as best they can in harmony with nature, a lot more than any other modern society I know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to do. Go more back to that and stop telling other people, like, you can't do that, you can't do that. No, what can you do yourself?
Well, I know, okay, I hand on heart, I know how difficult this is. I mean, I've got a piece of land and it's been barren and uncultivated, apart from, like, loads and loads of natural vegetation. Ever since I've had it, I've never put my hands in it at all and planted a potato or an onion. So I mean, like, I'm totally lazy. I'm sure if I look back over the last 6 or 7 years, I could have found the time to do it. If I really, really focused on it, I could have done it, but I haven't done it. Okay, so I'm totally a bad example. And then the other thing that came to my mind, I mean, there's this quite often you hear this podcaster Joe Rogan talking about hunting, like going off and hunting elk. I mean, I love the idea of doing that. Okay, I have to say I love the idea of doing it. I think the only thing that probably you could hunt around here would be javeli, a wild boar. Yeah, I don't particularly like it, and I don't particularly like the idea of doing it.
I like wild boar.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that if I decided, okay, I'm not going to the supermarket to buy meat anymore, and I don't trust the butcher that this is like a grass-fed burger. Yeah, my own. If I want meat, I have to go and shoot a javeli. Yeah. So first of all, I've got to get a gun. I've got to get a gun license. Then I've got to find out where the javeli are. I think some Spanish people told me that if you see a javeli at night, it's the last thing you ever see. Yeah, they're really dangerous. Yeah, so it's not. I mean, come on, it's much easier to go to the supermarket and buy a pre-packed. Because if I did find one and if I did manage to kill it, then somehow I've got to get it home and butcher it. And from what I understood, that's got to be done
quite fast,
pretty skillfully and quite quick.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just lose everything. So probably I'm just gonna not do it. I'm probably still gonna just go to the supermarket. So how does this pan out? I mean, if there was a government subsidy for me to go and cultivate my piece of land, and they would give me a solar panel, or probably I'd do it.
Well, let's just stop there, because I actually think that there is, I touched on earlier, I don't think it's about you and me.
Yeah.
But I would like to, like you expressed, it's been my dream for many years to get a hunting license with a bow.
Yeah.
Like, I believe in that if I'm not able to survive more or less anywhere in the world, then there's also a reason that I'm ultra dependent.
Yeah.
And I think it's very healthy for everyone to be able to survive. Like, can you catch a fish? Do you know how to slice it open, take off the head, take out the entrails, cook it?
Yeah.
Can you grow some food yourself? At least a potato and onion. Can you cook it also? So and I think that's what I need to do, is I need to set an example for the next generation.
Yeah.
So maybe you and me one day in 10 years will go hunting, and I'll enjoy eating that piece of meat that we hunted. I don't know. Maybe I won't.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have nightmares about it. But I think that's the way to go. It's small steps, and we need to have a lot of prayers for the world, mate. Because but I don't believe in these doomsday theories. I really don't. Like, life is here to stay.
Yeah. So you think that there's not 60 years of topsoil left, then it's over and out. You don't think that every glacier is going to melt and there's going to be a huge tsunami and we're all going to be, unless you live on a mountaintop, you're going to be underwater. And
Maybe, but I'm not going to fear it.
And that Greta Thunberg is the return of Jesus Christ, and we should all follow her. And
let's all follow.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I believe that like my plan with all this is actually that I don't know if you heard about Precariously.
No, I think I know what it is.
You heard about it, at least from Buddhism, meditation is like, but that's one of the things I want to touch on when I'm in the next stage of my life. Yeah. Then I want to go and experience and see if this is possible. Yeah. Can I actually sit down for months and only breathe and nurture myself in that way without dying from malnutrition? Yeah. And I believe it's possible. I don't know if it is, but I'm going to go test it. And maybe I can go in between, like intermittent fasting, 1 meal a day. And, then I believe there's a lot of things we can all do. And it's not about...
Well, I think there's a compelling amount of evidence that we, generally speaking, we eat far more than we need to eat. Yeah. We overindulge. I mean, not massively.
Yeah, overconsumption is a very good word.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I just don't. I think the thing that I keep on going back to in my head is like, how do we, not you and me, but I'm talking about humankind. How do we get many people on track with this, let's say, regenerative way of thinking? Yeah, because again, this is not somewhere I really want to go too far. I think this is another podcast, but it would seem that we've got many people out there with globalist intent who would like to control how we do things. Yeah, there's a lot of like forced compliance going on at the moment. We can see it really. I mean, it's not a figment of my imagination. We can all see it for real happening in our daily lives. And the opposite of that seems to be what you're talking about, and that is people taking self-responsibility and learning basic subsistence. It's almost a bit like becoming a Boy Scout or a Girl Guide or something like that, and getting proficiency badges. Yeah, but one of the easiest things on the planet to do is become a parent. Yeah, you don't need a license for that.
No, why not? No.
Yeah, but but seriously, I mean, like, it would be very, very good if some parents were more proficient. I mean, you were saying about your own experience, and I'm sure that many people, including myself, we can all say good things and bad things about our parents. There's always an upside and a downside. But how do you get How do we get to a situation where people are more mindful and more self-reliant when it comes to this whole process of what goes into their mouth and what they eat, the amount that they eat, where it came from, how? And especially in a world where, like, you can become a parent without a license.
But there's only one way, and you know this very well, mate, being the example. And I think that's what it is. And we have, luckily, like, I think if we go 10 years back and we would sit on the internet and check something out, there would not be so many vegans. There would not be so much focus on it as there is today. And I think we're getting there, slowly. But we cannot force anyone to do anything because it only postpones.
So it's personal change.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. For me, that's why I don't care how much meat you eat. I really don't. I don't care where it comes from. You're my friend anyway. But I do have vegan friends that would not be friends with someone if they eat too much meat or watch too much TV. I don't care if you go to the cinema and watch some movie or whatever. That's your choice. But I believe in being an example and seeing how far can I go in this life. Yeah. And I think that's what people need. They need good examples. Because often we have... Who gets the most media attention? It's the worst examples. Mm-hmm. It will be experts that has no idea what they're talking about, or it will be people with a lot of judgment and agitation. Yeah. It's very rare that we hear someone talking like Jordan Peterson. Yeah. Like, you don't get him on the news every day, but we probably should. Yeah. Like, I think he's very good at being the example and staying calm without judging everyone. I think he's actually one of the best examples in our age today of doing that. Not taking things personally, because that's what many do. They take everything personally and they think it's about them. Yeah. It's like, it's not. It's not.
Okay, Jasper. I think that's probably about it. Right at the beginning, you said something about a project that you're working on to do with giving people the life skills to be able to, like, turn their lives around. Do you want to say a little bit about that and about where you're at with it, how it's developing, what the next steps, blah blah blah?
Okay.
And then I think we wrap it up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on something a term I coined, I think, like 5-10 years ago. I call all-inclusive development. Again, it's about this self-responsibility. And it's like, do I include information or do I exclude information? Like exclusivity is actually the French King Louis. He invented that concept, and it started with clothes. And today, exclusivity or something being exclusive is a positive for most people. But when we exclude information, then we stay ignorant. And for me, it's about, like we've talked about agriculture, we've talked about bio, organic, and all these things, but all of these are like standards that we use today in industry, and they're stuck. They don't develop. They don't move. It's not like, oh, this is actually better, then the next week we do something different. So what I'm trying to create is a theory that is consciously and always developing itself from more and more experience, where people can add on, come with examples. So I call it all-inclusive development, and basically it's for the modern personality, because we have a lot of people in the world that don't have the issues we do. Like if we go to the East, they are very conscious about emptiness, or about sustainability and being connected with your surroundings and so on. But here, especially in the West, I see great personality issues. We have so many diagnoses. Everyone is freaking borderline, and we all need help in a certain way, but we need to be able to help ourselves without medication, without doctors. And this is what I'm trying to create. How can we do this? And mostly, actually, it's based around examples from my life, like stop eating sugar, small steps, and explaining what is small steps. It's actually a method that's created by a guy called Kaizen. He wrote this, and about how do I master my own life where I am now. And that's very much about mastering your outer world. It can be like, do your parents or your siblings or your friends put too much expectancy on you? So how do I start to be honest about where I am, and how do I start this process? Well, small steps. Mm-hmm. And I am quite away with developing methods now. My biggest issue is, like you probably know, is that sometimes it's about keeping it simple. Because for me, every time I start touching something, everything's connected, and suddenly I've written 5 pages about the first 10 lines were perfect. And then suddenly I've written 5 pages, and I'm like, oh man, I did it again. And then it becomes a blog post instead, and then I need to boil it down. But I have my 2 therapy teachers. They are trying to help me to develop this method. They taught me NLP, and I have great trust in that. Hopefully later this year I'll have something more ready. Okay. And then we'll probably start doing retreats where people can actually, again, if people can afford it, but I want to create something that is anyone can do freely. You're not going to have to pay like $10 to get a document from me. And it will always be freely accessible. But if you want my time and help in a special place, then my time and space is also valuable. Yeah. And but that's basically what I want to do. I want to help the ones that are most in need.
And people can find out about that where?
On my website, jaspersdialogue.com. There's a basic information about it, not much yet. I just finished it the other day. Yeah. But else write me and get in contact, and I'll reply as soon as I can.
Okay, Jasper, my friend, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick.
And that's it.
Yeah, cool.